there, Lucy from Cleverbean. I'm going to be sharing with you some of my favourite activities that I like to do for word work when I'm embedding it into my literacy circles or reading groups on a regular basis. Before we dive into that though, I think it's really important to note that whatever my focus is for my word work of the week, I like to introduce it explicitly outside of my reading groups or literature circles. So before I even start to introduce different activities, I have a dedicated time where I am explicitly introducing a new concept. I think it's also important to note that down in the younger grades, that could look like sight words, it could look like introducing phonemes, blends, digraphs, whereas up in the older grades, it could look like compound words, suffixes, prefixes. So it does look really different, but these activities you can use whether you are working in prep, kindergarten, all the way up to year 6. So make sure you look at how you can differentiate them and make it fit for your classroom and your word work needs. As a first activity to kick us off, I love to use a quality picture book. This one here, I've got Are We There Yet by Alison Lester. So students have some counters, they could also use their whiteboards in this, and they literally skim and scan through the book, finding whatever it is that you have taught them this week in their spelling rules. So for example, if they were doing the digraph sh, for example, they could skim and scan through the text until they find an example of the pattern that they're working on. So as they are going through, it is really nice to have the counters as like a little reminder that students have actually found a sound on that page. So that's first activity that I love doing in my word work. As another activity, again, using a quality picture book, I like to get students, you can also use the internet for this, I like to get students to go through and find again their rule and write those actual words down and highlight where their rule is. So if, for example, again, I was using the digraph sh, students could write at the top of their board and go through and find words that match their rule and then underline them as they find the digraph that they are looking for or the rule. I use whiteboards and I get students to then bring their whiteboards back in the share session at the end of the reading groups. Next activity is getting students to write out a word with, again, their spelling rule or what your focus is, getting them to write it out, underline where their focus is, drawing a picture of the word that matches, and then popping it into a sentence. I love using the paint palette strips because it breaks it up really nicely and the kids love it as well, and it just sticks in their books really nicely. So a great little resource to use. You can also just use it on their whiteboards or create a page in their writing notebook. Last word work activity is getting students to write their words or as many words, you can kind of set a challenge on little strips of paper. So this group here is working on the sh sound, whereas for this one, these are like a older grade working on compound words. And you can see on the whiteboard how getting them to use the end of the compound word to create a new word. So using their little strips of paper, it's like a bit of a challenge, and getting them to write as many of the words or the rule that you're working on, and then actually using them to make a paper chain. And that's a wrap on my favourite word work activities. For more great tips, tricks, lessons, units, resources, you can head over to cleverbean.co, where we host all of our explicit lessons on introducing these different strategies.